shall we go to find God if not in our own hearts and in every living being? That was said by Swami Vivekananda, the man who brought our teachings to the United States. So we're studying the work of St. Thomas Aquinas. And again, we have one of his wryly humorous poems. On the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, try and make no noise that goes beyond your house. Cries of passion between lovers are exempt. And you know, I thought about this a while. Why should cries of passion between lovers be exempt? Because all love, as he's pointed out, all love is God's love. There is no distinction. Anyone else have anything else to say about that short little poem?
Oh, what was the name of the poem we were just discussing again?
On the Sabbath. On the Sabbath.
Read.
On the Sabbath, try and make no noise that goes beyond your house. Cries of passion between lovers are exempt. Anyone else have anything to offer about this one?
Oh, forgot to unmute. Yeah, this is Heidi. I just think he's saying on the Sabbath, try and make no noise that goes beyond your house. You know, basically just to go inward instead of busying ourselves out and about.
Right.
That's how I take that one.
Yeah. And then, of course, his wry humor, cries of passion between lovers are exempt.
Yeah.
Heidi, would you like to read this next one? What does light talk about?
Dad, can I have some salt? Oh, sorry.
Sure. This is kind of a humorous one too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What does light talk about? When you recognize her beauty, the eye applauds, the heart stands in an ovation, and the tongue, when she is near, is on its best behavior. It speaks more like light. What does light talk about? I asked a plant that once. It said, I am not sure, but it makes me grow. What does light talk about? When you recognize her beauty, the eye applauds, the heart stands in an ovation, and the tongue, when she is near, is on its best behavior. It speaks more like light. What does light talk about? I asked a plant that once. It said, I am not sure, but it makes me grow.
Beautiful. So he's talking about light. He says, when you recognize her beauty, light, when you recognize her beauty, the eye applauds, the heart stands in an ovation, and the tongue, when she is near, is on her best behavior. Yeah. It's a humorous one. You're right, Heidi. It's just very sly instruction to us. It speaks more like light. What does light do? He says he asked a plant, what does light talk about? I'm not sure, but it makes me grow. Beautiful.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I think the last line is indicative of the light is what removes ignorance and makes us grow in our spiritual life.
Amen. Amen. Couldn't
Yes, and
agree more.
I noticed such a balance of like darkness and light in my own life. I mean, I see the light, but I also see the tendency of myself to stray away from the light at times.
Oh, yes. And that's true of every one of us. And it's true of even the illumined. As long as they're embodied, the body is a creation of and a creature of the gunas. And the gunas produce both darkness and light. And so there's always the tendency of the embodied being to be drawn to something dark. Bart, do you have the book open?
I do. Yes, yes, brother. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste, namaste.
Mhm.
I was just wondering if you'd like to read this next poem, Zeal.
Yes. Huh? Zeal. Zeal. Where does it come from? I don't have all the answers, but every time his lips touch mine, I get wonderfully crazy. And again, zeal. Zeal. Where does it come from? I don't have all the answers, but every time his lips touch mine, I get wonderfully crazy.
Anything from anyone about this one?
Hi, this is Somesh.
Yes.
This is the second time I'm here. I have no idea which book is it, so I'm just listening.
The book is Love Poems from God. Love Poems from God.
Okay.
This is not a class. This is a reading and discussion group of this lovely book of poems that is a collection of the testimony of 12 saints from various spiritual traditions. You'll find Tukaram and Kabir and Hafiz here, as well as Rumi and Saint John of the Cross, Saint Teresa of Avila, and Saint Thomas Aquinas, whose work we're studying. The book is a translation and interpretation of their poems by a man named Daniel Ladinsky, who lived and studied in South India for a number of years, more than a decade. And so we're we're looking at these wonderful poems. Zeal. Zeal was one of the favorite words of the Swami who sent me here, Swami Swahananda. Zeal is what, it was his translation, so to speak, of the Sanskrit word mumukshutvam, which is also translated as yearning and spiritual ache and so on. Zeal, where does it come from? I don't have all the answers, but every time his lips touch mine, I get wonderfully crazy. Really zealous, in other words. And Aquinas, you always have to watch him because he's telling us the flip side as well as the surface that he gives us. What he's saying is that, and as I hear it, is that every time we get zealous, it's because the divine's lips, metaphorically speaking, touched our own. When we get wonderfully crazy, zealous, really motivated for something, it's a touch of the divine. It's because of a touch of the divine. That's what I think he's saying to us. Anyone else have anything to contribute?
Yes. When I first read that, but every time his lips touch mine, you say to take all that when they say stuff like that literally, but when and not that you can't, but when I first read that, I thought, okay, I could feel that way reading one of these poems or reading scripture, or for me, when I'm in nature, I feel closest to God. Okay. So I draw zeal, I guess, from nature, so that's how I kind of read that in.
What I meant when I said we can take them literally, I don't think they're describing a metaphorical experience. They're using an actual experience as a metaphor for us. So
okay,
that's how I see this actuality that I was suggesting, that we take them seriously.
Okay.
So you've just said it so beautifully, Heidi. When you read these poems, when you read scripture, and that feeling arises in you when you're in nature, and the feeling arises in you of that intimate connection with the divine. It's a way of being wonderfully different than we normally are, which he's characterizing as wonderfully crazy. And I think these saintly types, being very extreme in their natures, they get maybe crazier than we allow ourselves to become. But I think they can be taken seriously when they say that they do that. Anyone else have anything to offer?
I was going to say, Brother Shankar, if someone just read this poem to me in isolation and said, name that author, I would say this sounds just like Rumi. Certainly,
doesn't it?
Certainly Thomas Aquinas is not the go-to, I would be thinking of.
You're absolutely right.
But it's beautiful that he had such an intimate, almost a Sufi type of experience of the kiss of God, like that, or yeah.
Yes, and you're right. If someone read this to me, I might suggest that same author that you mentioned, Rumi. It sounds very Rumi-like. But it's because truth is one, sages call it by many names. Anything else from anyone about this one? Okay. On we go. Swayam, would you like to read this one?
Sure, Brother Shankara. The pulse of God. The limbs of a tree reached down and lifted me, thinking I was its child. And in the meadows, my spirit becomes so quiet that if I put my cheek against the earth's body, I feel the pulse of God. Tell me the way you do that. Birds enter the private chambers of my Lord, and they all sang. They just sang. I gathered it was time to become a musician, and I did. Years passed, and the sky reached down one day and lifted me. The birds noticed and spoke. How do you enter the sun like that and know the pulse of God? The pulse of God. The limbs of a tree reached down and lifted me, thinking I was its child. And in the meadows, my spirit becomes so quiet that if I put my cheek against the earth's body, I feel the pulse of God. Tell me the way you do that. Birds, I'm not sure I'm reading that sentence right.
Tell me the way you do that, birds.
Oh,
He's addressing the birds.
birds, okay. Tell me the way you do that, birds. Enter the private chambers of my Lord. And they all sang, they just sang. I gathered it was time to become a musician, and I did. Years passed, and the sky reached down one day and lifted me. The birds noticed and spoke. How do you enter sun like that and know the pulse of God?
What did this give rise to you and you? Did this give rise to what arose in you as a result of hearing this poem? Anyone?
Well, the one thing that struck me is the power of music in spirituality.
Yes. And the power of nature.
Nature.
It says, like Heidi said, talking about the previous poem. We get different if we go out in nature and let nature have her way with us. If we surrender to what is there in nature. So he starts off by saying the limbs of a tree reached down one day and lifted me. Trees reached down and lifted me, thinking I was its child. And in the meadows, my spirit becomes so quiet.
the me he refers to in this poem, is that St. Thomas Aquinas? Is that who do you think that's who the me is?
I think he's always speaking of that both as the lowercase me, in this case, the me is lowercase, and sometimes the uppercase, the the indwelling spirit, which is so yes, I think he's talking about himself.
I thought that at first, and then it says, thinking I was its child, and like we're all children of God, or the divine. But yeah.
Well, as has been said many times, there's no one way to hear these poems.
Right.
There is not a correct interpretation. There's no doctrine that governs how we should hear these poems. We're going to hear them in each of our uniqueness. We're going to hear these words first written in Latin by this holy madman, St. Thomas Aquinas, all these centuries ago, and then discovered by discovered, I mean uncovered, revealed to us in modern English by this wonderful translator and interpreter, Daniel Ladinsky. So how can we begin to say there's one way to hear this? Each of us is a unique aspect of the divine. And so we're in contact with two others, Aquinas himself and then Ladinsky, who definitely freely says that these are interpretations, they're not literal translations. They're interpretations of his understanding of what each of these saint poets meant.
And I think it's interesting too, when he's talking to the bird, tell me how you enter the private chamber of my Lord. And then many years pass, and then that last stanza, how do you enter the sun like that and know the pulse of God? So he actually does what he's asking the birds, how they did that.
Yes,
So,
and then they ask him.
Right.
Because of his transcendental state. And the beautiful tipping point for me in this poem is when he asks them and they sang and just sang, and I want to get his words exactly right. Tell me the way you do that, birds. Enter the private chambers of my Lord. And they all sang. They just sang. And then the tipping point. I gathered it was time to become a musician, and I did. And notice that this follows that poem on zeal.
Right.
When he gets the indication of when it's time to do something, he doesn't hold back. He gets that wonderful craziness and becomes a musician. Years passed, and the sky reached down one day and lifted me. So first it was something earthly, the things of the meadow. And then it was the sky, which is always in his and the poems of these others identified with the divine. Years passed, and the sky reached down one day and lifted me. The birds noticed and spoke. The sky having lifted him. How do you enter the sun like that and know the pulse of God? Anything else from anyone about this remarkable poem? Every one of us has that mystical aspect of ourselves. Call it right brain awareness, call it heart, call it whatever you will. And that's where these poems are aimed like arrows. They're aimed at that awareness within us. That's why I say there's no one literal way, no one left mind way of interpreting these poems, because that's not where they come from, and that's not where they're directed. Anything else from anyone? Aaron, do you have the book open?
Yes, I do, but for whatever reason, I keep losing my place. So could you please remind me what page we're on?
Page 142, I believe it is. I believe
Okay.
that's what it says at the bottom of my thing here. The poem
Okay.
is Beauty Hones, Hones, Beauty Hones.
It is 142.
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Okay, so would you read this for us?
Okay. So many tears behind these words. Love hones like that, perfects and purifies the gift. So, excuse me, beautiful hones. So many tears behind
Beauty
these
Hones,
words.
not beautiful, Beauty Hones.
Oh, yes. So many tears behind these words. Love hones like that, perfects and purifies the gift.
Anyone have any idea why the tears? So many tears behind these words.
I think of maybe like Jesus weeping. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Mhm. And why did Jesus weep? What caused Jesus to weep?
Well, I think you might have to remind me.
Someone else. I'm asking the question openly.
Yes.
Why did Jesus weep? What was it that caused him to weep? What was it that was happening when these two words appear in the scripture? Jesus wept.
The sisters of Lazarus had just called him there because Lazarus had passed away and been put in the tomb for a couple of days. And out of the sorrow of human loss and being incarnated, Jesus completely identified with us on our level, complete incarnated love, could identify with our sorrows in terms of accepting death. And then he wept because his love was met by an indifferent world, people that were just clueless as to how to accept that kind of love. Or I could be wrong. I don't know.
Barton, there's no right or wrong here. That's beautiful what you said. And the more you spoke, the closer you were getting to at least
Mhm.
how I understood.
Mhm.
But before I say anything, anybody else, particularly anyone from the Christian tradition, why were the words written, Jesus wept? All right, I'll give my understanding.
Mm.
Jesus wept in compassion for the sorrow, yes, but in, as you said, Bart, because of the misunderstanding of life and death. This extraordinary attachment we have to the body. And so any Christian saint is going to identify entirely with Christ. Any of these Christian saints, they identify entirely with Christ. So many tears behind these words. His own ignorance, his own misunderstanding, his own attachment. That's what produces the tears. And then this gem, love hones like that. Hones. What is honing? Honing is sharpening something, honing an edge. It's not necessarily always pleasant. Hmm? And so love hones like that, perfects and purifies the gift of life, the gift of being. This poem to me is one of his most beautiful. And I think you were right, Bart, to start with Christ's tears, with those words, Jesus wept. So many tears behind these words.
Mm.
Anyone else have anything?
I just remembered that you have the laughing Christ picture right behind you. Speaking of
Yeah,
Jesus weeping, excuse me, even though that's
Aaron, you were breaking up. So would you say what you said again, please?
yes, I was just gonna say I forgot this picture. I remember now. I see behind you. You have the image of the laughing Christ, which I've forgotten about, and this reminded me. This is speaking of the Jesus weeping, of the Jesus laughing, which isn't included in the Bible, but I really appreciate.
Yes, well, it's not included in the canonical Gospels, but it is very much included in the Gospel of the Beloved Companion and in the Gospel of Thomas. You can almost hear Christ laughing out loud in the Gospel of Thomas, some of the things that he says. And of course, the Gospel of the Beloved Companion actually mentions some incidents in which he is laughing in a joyous mood.
I think over 2,000 years, the churches have had a really good amount of time to craft their marketing strategy of Jesus and which Jesus they want to present.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you meet him in the non-canonical gospels or just in the space of your heart, it's not what you expect. always, you know. It's he's uh yes, they can a Jesus that's not dour and in the iconography, but he can experience the full range of all of our human emotions, and that way we can identify with him so
Yes.
much.
Brother Shankara, isn't there something similar in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna where when I think his nephew dies, initially he's like laughing and seeing that liberation and he's joyful, but then 2 days later he gets into his human incarnation and then he sheds tears and tells that the mother is giving that experience so that he knows what a human person feels.
Yes, and not just so that he knows, but he actually feels it. He feels uh, he feels compassion is way too tiny a word for what he feels for those who have lost their Fridoi. And the same thing happens when Matur Babu dies. The man who was one of his supporters. Mm. And Mother weeps, the Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi. She weeps copiously, intensely. So many tears behind these words.
It's so hard to fathom how the divine loves us so much that they will incarnate themselves in this material world and experience all of these dreadful things that we go through in our lives. Maybe dreadful is not the right word. I mean, maybe that's just my own ignorance
Oh
of
no, dreadful is a very good word, Aaron. This last year, or the year and some, has been dreadful. There's no two ways about it. Yes, but it's interesting. We'll come across a poem soon in studying Aquinas. The title is You Cannot Be What God Is Not. Hmm. You cannot be what God is not. And so God is all of this suffering. So, yes, there is that aspect. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Hmm. And as you read the spiritual journey of such as Sri Ramakrishna, whether it be Sri Ramakrishna or Ramana Maharshi, and it's a tragedy that apparently the Vatican has hidden from us the spiritual journey of Christ. What actually happened between the time he was 12 years old and the time he was 30 years old. I have no reason to believe this other than my own conviction, but I'm convinced that all that is there in the Vatican and may sometime come out. I certainly hope so. But it's, as Bart said, the powers that be in the Christian world have decided what they want to show us of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to condemn them. But if you look at what actually happened at the Council of Nicaea,
Mm-hmm.
it appears that they were trying to create something in their best estimation. Of course, like all of us, they share this universal ignorance. But in their best estimation, their intentions were good. They were trying to craft something that would be understandable and transformative in people's lives. And if you look at Europe before Christianity pervaded it and what it became after Christianity pervaded it, there was a huge improvement. And so it wasn't that they were altogether mistaken in what they were trying to do, but human beings, because we have our ignorance, we just go on becoming more and more excessive about things. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and la-di-da-di-da. And so we get these few, like Aquinas and Meister Eckhart, and these that go way beyond what the church offers. And so we have these beautifully inspiring poems. Liam, are you there?
Hello?
Are you there, Liam? Are you available to read a poem for us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great.
Would you read If He Had Not Believed?
Yes. If it had not believed, would any seed take root if it had not believed his promise when God said, "Dears, I will reign, I will help you, I will turn into warmth and effulgence, I will be the mother I am, and let you draw from my body and rise and rise." If it had not believed, would any seed take root if it had not believed his promise when God said, "Dears, I will reign, I will help you, I will turn into warmth and effulgence, I will be the mother I am, and let you draw from my body and rise and rise."
What does anyone hear from in this poem?
I think of a flower blooming.
Yes, Aaron. Why? What is it that's behind the flower blooming?
I've just always thought of that as a great metaphor for like spiritual enlightenment, because it's, flowers are some of the most beautiful things in the world that we know of in the material world. So I see that image as a gift, maybe or just flowers to be a gift in general from God for us to enjoy.
Good.
I think it speaks to the importance of faith would any seed take root if it had not believed his promise?
Beautiful.
God said, "Dears, I will reign, I'll help you."
Yes. So go ahead, develop that thought. That's beautiful. Would any seed take root if it had not believed his promise? As you put the right emphasis on that. It had not believed his promise.
I think, again, it speaks to the teachings of even Vivekananda. That is, it's us who are holding us back. We are not letting go and believing that God will lift us.
The heart of this poem, it seems from here, is this stanza. I will be the mother, capital M. I will be the mother I am, and let you draw from my body, again, capital M, and rise and rise. And as Bart has told us before, Aquinas had to be very careful how he spoke because there were these guardians of the faith who, if you began to look like you were worshiping the mother too much, would take you to task and maybe worse. So I will be the mother I am, and let you draw from my body and rise and rise. It seems that this speaks directly to us. This speaks directly to us. We can rely on that. I will be the rain, the warmth, and the effulgence. Effulgence is such a beautiful word. It means that inward shining. It shines forth from the sun, but the effulgence occurs within the sun and then bursts forth as the sunlight. And the effulgence occurs within us and then comes forth as Aaron said, the flower. Anything else from anyone? Hello, Katrina. So good you joined us.
Yes, I had to work a little late today.
Well, welcome regardless.
But thank you. I figured I'd get some of the teachings. Glad you guys are here.
Otherwise, the darkness. I have a cause. We need those, don't we? Otherwise, the darkness and the cold gets in, and everything starts to ache. My soul has a purpose. It is to love. If I do not fulfill my heart's vocation, I suffer. Otherwise, the darkness. I have a cause. We need those, don't we? Otherwise, the darkness and the cold gets in, and everything starts to ache. My soul has a purpose. It is to love. If I do not fulfill my heart's vocation, I suffer. As every one of these poets tells us in one way or another, it is love and love alone in its many expressions that keeps away the darkness. And that's why it was so delightful in that first poem we read about the Sabbath, that the cries of lovers are exempt, because in their way they are keeping away the darkness. Otherwise, the darkness gets in and everything starts to ache. And every one of us knows exactly what that means. I don't think there's one among us sitting with us this evening who doesn't know exactly what that means. So if we practice love and forgiveness, as Saint Teresa of Avila says in her poem, Every Prophet's Name, God takes her to this wondrous place where only light exists. And she says, is your name the only key to this place? And he says, how many eons do you think we have existed? Millions of souls have entered me. Every prophet's name is a key, as is every heart full of forgiveness and love. And this is just an echo of this from Aquinas's perspective. I have a cause. We need those, don't we? Otherwise, the darkness and the cold gets in, and everything starts to ache. My soul has a purpose. It is to love. If I do not fulfill my heart's vocation, I suffer. Everything starts to ache. So that's how I hear this poem. Anyone else have anything to say about it? It's a beautiful poem.
Yes, it is a beautiful poem. And I would also just add, just from life experience about if I do not fulfill my heart's vocation, I suffer. And I think other people suffer also when you hold back your gifts and you don't share, whether it's music, whether it's, kind of your gift, Shankara, what you're doing here with this poetry thing, sharing with all your wisdom with us. Um, you know, Other people suffer as well.
Yes, Heidi, you're so right. And when we do shine forth, that little Sunday school poem, that little Sunday school song, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Shine, shine, shine. What a beautiful, beautiful little song that is. We don't have to be a Thomas Aquinas. Few of us will be. But we can open the eyes of us and let the light shine out. In one poem that we read, it was as the full moon in your eyes. And in a Scottish blessing, it's like, it's said to be like a great peat fire warming anyone who comes near. Yes, yes, yes. And, but he very much means it. If we, well, Cindy Craven has a wonderful song called Love's Shining Peace. Love's the only gift you're given, you can't keep. If you hide it deep inside, it goes to sleep. And when that happens, you suffer. And so it's best that we give our gifts. And Heidi said, it doesn't matter what they are, you know, whether it be music or this wonderful poetry, your own wonderful poetry. But just a smile, just a genuine smile, just that wonderful, sweet light in your eyes.
Or how about June's wonderful poem she shared with us?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
You know, we're publishing that poem in a publication that I'm fortunate enough to edit called American Vedantist. She gave us permission.
Yeah.
And Circles of Glass. Beautiful, beautiful poem.
Yes, Brother Shankar, I just want to say real quickly, like, for whatever reason, I've been noticing lately, like, if I'm out walking on the street and I see like a homeless person, like, for example, like he doesn't have a leg, or, you know, he has to use crutches, and I just like feel so much like pain and sorrow for the suffering of other people. And it makes me recognize just the oneness and everything, and how another person's pain and suffering is my own pain and suffering.
Amen. No man is an island entire of himself. Each one is part of the main. That's a beautiful poem by, I've forgotten whom now. Rudyard Kipling. It's almost 9 o'clock. Any final words from anyone? Okay, dears. Until next time. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind. May you go forward in the Lord's loving and protective embrace. Om. Amen. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. And I'll repeat the short aphorism that I started with. This is from Swami Vivekananda. Where shall we go to find God, if not in our own hearts and in every living being? So, until next week, for those of us who are of that mind, or tomorrow night we will study the life of Holy Mother, same time, 8 o'clock. And then on Wednesday, we'll study the Yoga of Wisdom, Jnana Yoga, as offered to us by Swami Vivekananda. Saturday, this coming Saturday, we have a memorial service for beloved Swami Yogeshananda, the monk who founded this center. And then on Sunday, we'll celebrate the birthday of Sri Ramakrishna, the founder of our lineage, as they're called in India, which is in the West they're called churches. So much appreciate all of you being here. It's a joy to share these poems with you. Any final thoughts from anyone?
Yes, Brother Shankar, this is truly a highlight of my week to be able to attend this class, and this is one of my favorite classes we do, so thank you so much.
So glad. Yes, well, the more interactive it is, the more enjoyable it is, the more people share their hearts and their feelings and their thoughts. It's a wonderful thing. Heidi, so glad you were with us. And do you know why June hasn't been with us for the last couple of weeks?
Well, she had her son and his girlfriend were visiting her. I think they arrived last Tuesday, and I'm not sure if they're still here or not, but
I see.
I have a hunch that's, probably why she wasn't here last week. But I don't know.
Sure, she was getting ready for that. Well, when you speak with her, should you speak with her, just tell her we love her and we miss her, and we wish her well.
I certainly will. Yes, I will touch base with her. I'll attempt tomorrow. So.
Okay, good. All right.
But it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Shankara and everybody here. I enjoy this very much too. So. Yeah,
I think we all do, Heidi. I think this is all, to be in the company of these saints. These are as Aquinas said, these are the truly wonderfully crazy people. The people who are not centered on what the rest of the world is centered on. And it is really refreshing to be in their company.
Right.
Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. Well, see you next week. Swayam, I'm glad to see that you're doing well.
Thank you,
otherwise you wouldn't be able to be with us.
Thank you.
Just to let you know, I had a follow-up visit a nurse visit today, and all the numbers were good and everything. So everything's coming along fine.
Good to know, Brother Shankara.
All right. Until next time, dears.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Good night. Good night.